Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show discussion today. Now, today we're going to talk about climate change and India's commitment. In fact, 5 years after the Paris Climate Change Agreement, India is one of the few developing countries which is not only meeting its commitments, but also aspiring to do more. In fact, according to one report, the Climate Transparency Report, India is the only G20 nation which has met its commitments. So we'll try and understand what those commitments are, how we have met them, what are the future goals, and how we are trying to do more, aspiring to do more, and what is it that other nations, other countries, specifically the developed countries, need to do here. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Professor C.K. Varshney is joining us, a well-known environmentalist and also a former Dean of School of Environmental Sciences at JNU. We're also joined by Polash Mukerjee. He's the lead air quality at NRDC India. Welcome, both of you, Polash and Professor Varshney as well. Let me begin with you, Polash, and let's start by understanding a bit more about what our commitments were during the Paris Climate Change Agreement and how we have managed to go ahead and fulfill those commitments so far in the 5 years. And now we have managed to, outscore others as well.
Right. Thank you, Vishal. So under the Paris Agreement, every country has to come up with their nationally determined contributions to what they would do towards achieving climate goals. So India has 3 targets. India has a target of achieving between 33 and 35% emission intensity by 2030. India also has a renewables target of achieving achieving 60% renewables by 2030, as well as India has a target of creating additional carbon sinks. So these are 3 of India's targets, of which at the moment India is doing very well on 2 of the 3 targets. So we are on track to achieve these targets for both the renewable energy as well as the emission intensity targets. And I believe that's what the recent report has said, that we are one of the few G20 nations that are well in line for a 2-degree compliant world. That is ensuring that global warming is maintained at less than 2 degrees. However, I'm sure Dr. Varshney will also talk about this. There are questions about whether this is enough, whether the Paris Agreement by itself is strong enough or ensures compliance enough from all the countries. Okay. And of course, we apart from the international goals, we have a lot of domestic goals in terms of achieving our own environmental standards, in terms of achieving equity, in terms of growth and consumption, and all-round development for all our population across India.
Okay. We'll come to that part as well, definitely during the course of the discussion, whether or not those goals which were set in Paris Climate Change Agreement are enough now, given the present situation. But Professor Varshney, first of all, I'd like to seek your views also on the way India has progressed. Quite a wonderful job. Obviously, there is always a room to do more when we talk about climate change and environment-related issues. But so far, so good, would you say?
I think that what we have committed, we have tried to really achieve that. And we are really very successful in achieving. But the question is that will that save us from the impact of the climate change? And perhaps that is not the case, because we have to take the globe as a whole, because everything is interconnected. We are just one partner, and our total contribution to the problem of climate change or carbon dioxide emission is very limited. In fact, I will not be wrong to say that it is a very minor kind as compared to other major polluters. The polluters are really giving carbon dioxide sometimes a good rhetoric, but actually they are not walking the talk. And that is a reason that during the up to 2018, carbon dioxide emission or loading of the atmosphere has steadily increased. It is only in 2019, because of the COVID and because of the lockdown and the adverse health conditions, global health conditions prevailed, where everything was absolutely in suspension and animation. And I should say that it was because of this, no industrial activity, no transportation, no air traffic, that there is some little blip by which it has come down. But fact of the matter is that this is very temporary and already it has started reversing. So the question is that as far as the climate change concerned and the commitments that were made by the countries in 2015, the estimates are that we will end up somewhere with a global temperature of 2.7.
Okay.
Which means that the countries have to really work very hard, come out with very aggressive commitment, and also a kind of resolve, which is not only of the government, but also of the industry and the people in general. And unless that is taking place, it looks that we will be really not very successful in achieving, or at least the Paris Agreement is still lacking the very objective of saving mankind from the impending crisis going to be caused by climate change and global warming.
Okay.
I will
Indeed.
give you one or two instances, and that is very instructive, because the island nations would like that the average global temperature by 2100 should not exceed 1.5. Otherwise, it is going to be very catastrophic. But I think this is a very desirable objective. But fact of the matter is that we are very far. We have to work very hard. And there is not much time left, unfortunately. Because if we are going to do this, then we have to cut down global emission by half within next 7 years to achieve this. And if that is not really achieved, then I think the exercise that we have done with great effort to bring the global community to agree that the climate change is a very important issue. Let me tell you, there are many pluses.
Okay.
And one such plus is that now all governments have taken climate change seriously. It is one of their top agenda. And actually, because of the COVID condition and because that certain countries have really backtracked, and notably the United States, because of the Trump administration has really walked out. But now some hope is there because the Joe Biden has come. And I think this is going to be their central piece of their presidency, where they are going to come up with climate change agenda in a very aggressive way.
Okay.
And they are also going to join back the Paris Treaty.
Okay.
So I think these are some of the, I should say, silver lining that we have. But these are initial stages. We have to see how things will pan out after we come out from this recession and the dark clouds of global 19. So this is a very big question mark.
Okay.
And it is very likely that in our anxiety to catch up with the subdued economic condition, we might really forget for a time being again the commitment for the climate change. Now, this is a kind of, I should say, some fear that we have, but it is too early to say that what is going to happen. But certainly the US joining back will have a very positive impact in most of the countries and perhaps I would say globally.
Okay, indeed, that is really important out there, that what more needs to be done. And there are several developments, including, the return of the United States of America to the Paris Climate Change Agreement under the new administration. Polash will talk about that as well. But as, Professor Varshney is pointing out that whatever is being done will not be enough, specifically if there are individual efforts. As he was pointing out, India is one of the stakeholders there, and this is a global crisis. So obviously it will have to be tackled at a global level. So according to you, what is it that seems to be specifically lacking when we talk about the developing countries and specifically the developed nations as well, the ones who are more polluting and are not contributing to the goals there?
Look, I think that in terms of historical emissions, there is absolutely no doubt that the developed countries are singularly have been responsible for most of the emissions that are already out in the atmosphere right now. But in terms of the recent past, if you look at the last 10 years and also the future to come ahead, India is catching up very fast. Countries like India and China, our contributions are rising rapidly. Of course, we still have a long way to go. And in terms of per capita emissions, we are nowhere close to as significant as some of the developed countries. But here, what we need to notice is that climate change isn't something that is in the future or will come in the future. It is already here. If you look at last year, the year of 2020, India faced, I think, about 4 or 5 different cyclones and storms. There were droughts as well as floods at the same time. There was a locust attack, first after many years that we heard of. And these are instances of climate change that are happening now, that are happening today. So if you look at even within our country, climate change has definitely demonstrated that it affects different people unequally, and the poor and the marginalized, they are the first ones to face the brunt of this. So in order to achieve our own domestic goals of equal, inclusive growth, sustainable growth for everybody, it's very important that we address the issue of the environment and of consumption in a very definite and time-bound manner.
Okay.
So while the international goals of Paris Treaty and climate change agreements, those are very important. It is for our own survival and our own sustainable growth that we need to prioritize climate action.
Okay, indeed. Professor Varshney, you were earlier talking about, that how a lot needs to be done from here onwards as well. And there are several experts who put forth the view that as far as even India is concerned, there needs to be a lot of push for, work to be done in renewable energy sector as a mitigation strategy. So how do you think that will add to the efforts which are already being made, and what more needs to be done there?
No, I tell you that we have to really see that the deforestation is stopped. And I particularly like to flag that in Brazil, the deforestation is going on in a very severe way. And at the same time, because of every year, we are getting record high temperatures. And as a consequence of which, you will find that there have been forest fires. And these forest fires have really emitted huge amount of carbon, which was present in the vegetation and in the soil and in the litter. That is the organic matter which sits on the floor of the forest. So all that has burned and has added. These are the things which perhaps the global models have not really taken into account. And in future, because of the temperature rise, drought is going to increase, which will translate into shortages of water and for irrigation and for agriculture. And I think that at high temperature, the quality of food that we produce also goes down. So I think nutritionally, it is also going to be a constraint. And considering all that, those who are below poverty line are also going to suffer the worst, while their contribution is the minimum. So in that way, you will find that disparities will increase, resulting into social tension, as well as, I will say, the political upheaval. So these are the things which are happening. And let me also tell you that because of the global warming, it is not like an electrical switch that I just put it off and everything is silent. That is not the case, because there is a lot of inertia. So even if we reduce our emission to a most desirable level, even then the global warming will continue. And as a consequence, the sea level rise is a very major threat. And that cannot be pushed back by any account. Mangroves are being destroyed left and right, whatever little are left. And therefore, you will find that coastal communities are going to suffer in a big way. Bangladesh is in case in point. Many of the coastal villages have become so saline that the people are migrating inwards. And once that happens, it is very difficult to take care of these refugees, which are environmental refugees, which are forced by the action of somebody else, which is far away from their own land. And I think this is what it is. India has 7,000 kilometers of coastline. And you must understand that a very major section, almost 40% roughly, globally, people live within 100 kilometers of the coastline. So you can see that if this population starts migrating inwards, the kind of pressure that we will have on cities, social surveys, and other facilities are going to be severe.
Okay.
And this is very difficult. We have already seen, I should say, some kind of a promo in the form of COVID-19, when a large population started migrating to their own villages. And we will find that what a pity it was, and people were suffering from all kinds of problems, and it was endless list of their misery.
Okay.
So you can see that when the global community gradually is going to push from their traditional mooring back into the new environment, the kind of problem that is going to be, who is going to accept them, in what way they are going to adjust, are the issues about which our understanding is very limited.
Okay.
But it is happening. It is happening.
Professor Varshney, definitely that's happening. But on the renewable energy part, I'd like to bring you back there. There is a lot which is being done. So do you believe that more focus on renewable energy can be used as a mitigation strategy here?
Right. I think you are right. And I want to really thank you for raising this. On a renewable energy front, we are doing very well. And I think the global community is also going to do well, because the prices of solar energy have really precipitously come down. And at the same time, it has become commercially viable. In fact, I will say it is competing. And that is something on which we can see that some positive things are happening. But this contribution is welcome and a very desirable one. But again, it is a very limited one, because if the carbon sequestration is going to be limited because of the forest fire and because of the national policies which encourage deforestation and destruction of the mangrove,
okay,
then I think most of these advantages will have very little impact. In fact, they will be overshadowed by the kind of activities that we are doing. So I think there are some countries which have to become more serious about global climate change, mere talking or mere really making some kind of a discussion.
Okay.
One more thing I would like to say, that it is not only the government alone which is going to be responsible for this. Whatever they do, people's participation, and I will say people's participation with commitment and enthusiasm is very necessary. So on this, we have to work very hard, that how do we enlist the commitment of the people? And if we are able to do that in next few years, I can tell you that it is not very difficult for us to really get over the problem which we have really been facing all these years.
Okay, definitely. Everybody, all stakeholders will have to work together, as Professor Varshney is pointing out, and definitely, all things will have to be looked into a holistic perspective. But I'd like to bring Polash, you back again here on the renewable energy part. As Professor Varshney was also saying, a lot is being done as far as India is concerned. But in terms of using it as a mitigation strategy, how far do we need to go as far as the renewable energy part is concerned? And let's also factor in the other stakeholders as well, the other countries, developing nations, developed nations as well, because it's just not about one country or one part of the globe.
Look, on the renewable front, I think there has been some progress made, like Professor Varshney just said. In terms of installed capacities, India is progressing fairly well towards its targets. And in terms of reducing the cost of renewables, like we said, India now has one of the lowest rates of electricity produced from utility scale solar in the world. And with developments like the International Solar Alliance, these are all very positive steps. But even within the renewables, there are a couple of challenges. One is, what do we do with our legacy problems with the grid and with our power generation? Like, for instance, even today, Delhi utilizes much of the power that Delhi utilizes, and Delhi is just an example here. Much of the power that a city utilizes is from long-term power purchase agreements that are made with thermal power plants that produce not so clean power. And apart from this, there is the question of how the renewable energy that we are generating must be integrated back into the grid. There are questions of storage, and there is the national storage mission that is being launched recently. And these are all challenges that we need to do, how to use this renewable energy effectively and how to make sure that this is the priority.
Okay.
The second is that within renewable energy is that even so far, much of the developments have been at the utility scale. We need to be able to transition away from that to off-grid kind of developments or even decentralized rooftop solar, which is not really the case as much right now. So these are all challenges that need to be looked at in the coming years, and there definitely is progress that can be made there.
Okay, but apart from the renewable energy part here, Polash, if you look at the other aspects as well as Professor Varshney was pointing, which are the focus areas specifically for India to go ahead and do more? We've already met our commitments. We're doing really well in comparison to other nations, but as far as we are concerned, we want to do more. So which should be the focus areas from India's perspective? That's one. And simultaneously, if you look at the work which needs to be done by other nations as well, the other stakeholders, be it developed nations or developing countries as well in those aspects.
Look, I'd just say that apart from the international commitments, are all domestic commitments. If you look at ensuring clean, sustainable growth for all our entire population, that itself is a huge challenge in itself. Even today, there is a significant part of our population that uses solid fuel for domestic energy requirements, that cooks on chulhas that use wood or firewood or cow dung cakes or coal and so on. So ensuring access to clean energy for all our population, that itself could have significant gains in terms of our commitments towards climate change. The second area where I think that there is a lot to be done, and this is the area that I work on, is ensuring good public health for all our citizens. If you look at the state of our cities, many of our cities are counted amongst the most polluted in terms of air pollution in the world. We know that our rivers are not the cleanest, and we know that the state of groundwater is being depleted every year. So these are all environmental concerns that will directly affect us. And you talk about global warming or you talk about climate change, the immediate impacts are already beginning to be seen all around us right now. So these are targets that we need to focus on right now, because like Dr. Varshney said, these become triggers of social unrest, and then make it increasingly harder to create consensus towards which way to go.
Okay.
So these are governance challenges that will come up in the coming years and desperately require the full focus of all stakeholders right now.
Okay, and what about the other nations, developing countries and developed nations as well? They need to walk the talk here as well, Polash.
Agreed. I mean, there is significant contribution that we could do. There are these kind of global alliances, and specifically in terms of cooperation, in terms of not just technology transfer, but also increasingly in terms of climate finance. There are lots of areas that require levels of funding that are hard to receive in a country like ours even today. So these are areas where developed countries who bear the burden of historical emissions, they must step up and walk the talk, like you said. They must put their wallets where their mouths are and contribute significantly so that collaboration increases between the developed and the developing world, and so that the objectives that the Paris Agreement sets out are achieved successfully.
Okay, definitely. There it is. Thank you so much, Polash and Professor Varshney as well for sharing your important views here on this very, very significant and important aspect when we are talking about the global scenario here in terms of climate change. As the reports point out, as the facts point out, India has been doing its bit by living up to the commitments which it made on the global stage at Paris Climate Change Agreement and is willing and trying to do more as well. But as our panelists were pointing, there are several domestic challenges which we also need to meet, and obviously other stakeholders like the developed countries specifically, they also need to walk the talk right now. Thank you so much for watching Rajya Sabha Television. We'll come back again.